I'm Madison, 34 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in our family. My younger sister Amber has made one impulsive decision after another since we were teens. Our difficult childhood shaped us differently. I became cautious, she became reckless. But nothing prepared me for the moment she announced her fourth pregnancy and casually declared her 3 kids would move in with me for months. The family explosion that followed my refusal changed everything between us. Before I get into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit subscribe to join my journey through this family drama. You won't believe what happened next. Life had been going pretty well for me before Amber's announcement. I've built a solid career as a software developer, working remotely for a Seattle-based tech company. My 2-bedroom apartment isn't huge, but it's cozy, my sanctuary filled with plants, books, and a dedicated home office where I spend most weekdays coding. I've decorated it exactly how I want, with no compromises, which is something I deeply value after years of having no control over my environment. That control was something neither Amber nor I had growing up. Our parents, Richard and Diane Reynolds, were physically present but emotionally absent. Dad worked long hours as a sales representative, often drowning work frustrations in alcohol. Mom had untreated depression that left her disengaged most days. They provided the basics, food, shelter, clothing, but the nurturing, guidance, and stability children need. That was missing. By the time I was 10, I had become the de facto parent in our household. I made sure Amber got to school, that we both had lunches packed, that homework was completed. I learned to cook simple meals, do laundry, and keep track of bills, reminding our parents when they were due. While other kids my age were playing at friends' houses or joining after-school clubs, I was keeping our household from falling apart. Madison was born middle-aged. My mother would joke to neighbors when they commented on how mature I was. It wasn't a compliment, it was an abdication of responsibility. Amber, being 2 years younger, responded differently to our upbringing. Where I became hyper-responsible, she sought attention through rebellion. By 13, she was skipping classes. By 15, she was sneaking out at night. By 17, she was pregnant with Emma. I took a different path. School became my escape, a place where effort yielded predictable rewards. Good grades led to scholarships, which led to college across the country. I felt guilty leaving Amber behind, but I needed to build my own life. Computer science provided the logical, orderly world I craved, and I excelled. Amber dropped out of high school when she got pregnant. Our parents' response was minimal, disappointment expressed in sighs rather than words, followed by grudging accommodation. Amber and baby Emma took over my old bedroom. I sent money home from my part-time campus job, feeling responsible even from a distance. Emma was 2 when Amber met Tyler's father, a bartender named Jason. They had a whirlwind romance that lasted just long enough for Amber to get pregnant again, before Jason decided fatherhood wasn't for him. By the time Tyler was born, Jason was gone. I had just started my career then, coming home for 2 weeks to help Amber adjust to having 2 children. Those 2 weeks stretched into a month as I realized how overwhelmed she was. I used up all my vacation time and worked remotely when possible, essentially parenting both Emma and newborn Tyler while Amber struggled with postpartum depression. When I finally returned to my own life, the pattern was set. I became the emergency contact, the financial backup, the reliable sister who would drop everything when a crisis emerged. And they emerged often. Lily came 3 years later. Another relationship, another pregnancy, another man walking away. Carlos lasted longer than Jason, he stayed until Lily was 6 months old, but the result was the same. Amber, now with 3 children under 8, leaning heavily on me for support. Don't misunderstand, I love my nieces and nephew. Emma is thoughtful and bookish, reminding me of myself at 8. Tyler is a bundle of 5-year-old energy, with a surprising talent for building elaborate Lego creations. 3-year-old Lily is still finding her personality, but her infectious giggle can brighten the darkest day. I've tried to be the stable adult in their lives without overstepping. Weekend visits at my apartment. Summer vacations together. Emergency funds for school supplies or medical bills. But I've also worked to maintain boundaries, to build my own life and career rather than becoming Amber's permanent backup. It hasn't been easy. Amber has grown to expect my help, and the line between supporting and enabling became increasingly blurred. When she couldn't afford rent last year, I covered 3 months, but insisted she work with a financial counselor I found and paid for. When Emma needed braces, I split the cost with her, but required Amber to set up a health savings account for future expenses. Each time, the help I offered came with strings attached, strings meant to guide Amber toward greater stability and independence. Each time, she resented those strings while accepting the help. Each time, the tension between us grew. 2 months ago, Amber met Mark Davis at the restaurant where she waitresses. He's a delivery driver, 10 years her senior, with a failed marriage behind him. Amber was immediately smitten, describing him as finally a real man, compared to her previous boyfriends. I was cautiously optimistic, but concerned by how quickly he integrated into her life and her children's lives. I met Mark for the first time 3 weeks after they started dating, when Amber brought him to our regular Sunday dinner at my apartment. He seemed pleasant enough. Polite to me, good with the kids, but something about the relationship felt rushed, as their intense physical affection and inside jokes suggested a bond far deeper than their short time together would allow. Still, I was determined to be supportive. Amber deserved happiness, and the kids deserved stability. If Mark could provide both, I would welcome him with open arms. Little did I know that this tentative family unit was about to expand in a way that would test the limits of my support and our relationship. That fateful Sunday started like any other family dinner at my apartment. I had spent the morning preparing Amber's favorite, lasagna with garlic bread and Caesar salad. The kids had their usual preferences: plain pasta for picky Lily, extra cheese for Tyler, and a double helping of salad for Emma, who had recently declared herself a health enthusiast after learning about nutrition at school. I heard them before I saw them, the cacophony of children's voices in the hallway, Amber's laugh, and a deeper male voice that I now recognized as Mark's. When I opened the door, the kids rushed in as usual. Emma showed me her new friendship bracelet, Tyler headed straight for the toy box I kept for them, and Lily wrapped herself around my leg in a koala hug. "Something smells amazing," Mark said, stepping inside with an arm firmly around Amber's waist. They had that glow that new couples often have, but Amber seemed especially radiant. "Just the usual Sunday feast," I replied, hugging my sister. She held on a beat longer than normal, which I should have recognized as a sign of what was to come. Dinner was lively, with the kids sharing school stories and Mark entertaining us with tales from his delivery route. I noticed Amber barely touching her wine, unusual for her, but didn't think much of it until dessert time. As I served the chocolate cake, Amber clinked her water glass with a fork. The kids quieted down, and she exchanged a meaningful look with Mark, who nodded encouragingly. "Everyone, we have some exciting news," Amber announced, her voice high with excitement. "Mark and I are having a baby." The children's reactions varied. Emma's face fell momentarily before she composed it into a smile. Tyler looked confused. Lily clapped her hands, probably responding to the excited tone rather than understanding the news. I forced what I hoped was a convincing smile. "Wow, that's big news. Congratulations." Inside, my mind was racing. They'd known each other for 2 months. Amber was already stretched thin with 3 kids. Mark's job wasn't exactly lucrative, I had so many questions, but bit my tongue. Thanks, sis, Amber beamed, not noticing my internal struggle. We know it's fast, but when it's right, it's right. Right, babe? She leaned into Mark, who kissed her temple. Absolutely, he agreed, though I detected a hint of nervousness behind his confident tone. When is the baby coming? Emma asked, ever practical. In about 7 months, Amber answered. I'm already almost 8 weeks along. I did the math in my head. They'd known each other for 8 weeks. Which meant. We were careful, Amber added, seeing my expression. Sometimes the universe has other plans. I nodded, still processing, when Amber dropped the real bombshell. And the best part is that you're going to have the kids stay with you for a while, Maddie, she announced as if bestowing a wonderful gift. Just for the last month or 2 of pregnancy, and maybe a few weeks after the birth. My apartment is too small for a newborn and 3 kids, and Mark and I will need time to adjust and find a bigger place. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. What? I finally managed, certain I had misheard. You want the kids to move in with me? All 3 of them? 4 months. Amber nodded enthusiastically. It makes perfect sense. You have the extra bedroom, you work from home, and the kids love staying with you. Emma can even keep going to the same school since you're in the district. But my spare room only has 1 queen bed, I said, grasping for practical objections while my mind reeled. And I work full-time, Amber. I have meetings, deadlines. You can put the bed against the wall and get a trundle for Tyler, Amber countered. Lily can sleep with Emma. And you're always saying how flexible your job is. Flexible for occasional doctor appointments or school events, not for becoming a full-time parent to 3 children overnight. But before I could articulate this, Mark jumped in. We'd help financially, of course, he offered, though his vague promise did little to address my concerns. I glanced at the children, who were watching this exchange with varying degrees of comprehension. Emma, the oldest and most perceptive, was studying my face carefully. Amber, can we talk in the kitchen for a minute? I asked, standing up. Sure, she replied, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. Kids, show Uncle Mark your aunt's cool toy collection while we have a quick sister chat. In the kitchen, I took a deep breath before turning to face my sister. Amber, I can't just take in 3 children for months. That's not a small favor, that's a complete life disruption. Amber's smile faltered. I thought you'd be happy to help. You're always saying you want to spend more time with the kids. For weekends and day trips, yes. Not as their primary caregiver for months while working full-time. But you're so good with them, she persisted. And it's not like you have your own family to worry about. The comment stung, a reminder that at 34, I hadn't found a partner, or had children of my own. Not because I didn't want those things eventually, but because I'd been focused on building my career, and if I'm honest, helping Amber with her children. My life isn't less valuable, or my time less important, because I don't have children, I said quietly, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. That's not what I meant, Amber backpedaled. Just that you have more flexibility. I have a demanding job that I love and have worked hard for. I have commitments, a routine, personal space that's important to me. It's only temporary, Amber insisted. And they're your family. Yes, they're my family who I love, which is why I want what's best for them. And having their lives completely disrupted for months isn't what's best. Amber's expression hardened. So what am I supposed to do? The doctor already said this pregnancy is high risk, because of complications I had with Lily. I'll need bed rest toward the end. This was the first I'd heard of any complications. Have you looked into other options? Family leave from work. Assistance programs. What about Mark's family? His parents are in Arizona, and my job doesn't offer paid leave. I thought I could count on you, Madison. You've always been there before. And there it was, the expectation that had grown between us over the years. Because I had helped in the past, often at considerable personal cost, the help was now assumed rather than appreciated. I love you, and I love the kids, I said carefully. But I can't do this, Amber. It's too much to ask. Amber's face flushed red, a sure sign that her temper was rising. I'd seen this expression many times growing up, when our parents missed her school performances, when boyfriends disappointed her, when life didn't bend to her will. But I'd rarely been the target of it. Too much to ask, she repeated, her voice rising. After everything I've been through. Single motherhood, deadbeat exes, working 2 jobs sometimes, and you can't handle the kids for a few months. I tried to keep my voice level. It's not about handling them. It's about what's practical and reasonable. My apartment has 1 spare bedroom. I work 40+ hours a week. I have no experience being a full-time caregiver to 3 children. You don't have kids, so you wouldn't understand, Amber shot back, the familiar refrain she used whenever I questioned her parenting decisions. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. I've made plenty of sacrifices, Amber, I said, my own anger starting to simmer. Who paid for Emma's emergency room visit last year when she broke her arm? Who takes the kids every other weekend so you can have me time? Who helped you make rent when you were between jobs? That's different. That's just money and occasional babysitting. I'm asking for real help now. And what happens when a few months turns into longer? What happens when you and Mark can't find an affordable 4-bedroom apartment in this market? What happens if your relationship hits a rough patch with the stress of a new baby? Amber's eyes narrowed. So that's what this is about. You don't think Mark and I will last. That's not. You've always looked down on my choices, she continued, building steam. Little Miss Perfect with her college degree and fancy job, judging her mess of a sister. I don't judge you, I protested, though part of me wondered if that was entirely true. I'm trying to be realistic about what I can offer. The kitchen door swung open, and Mark stood there awkwardly, Lily balanced on his hip. Everything okay? The kids can hear you guys. No, everything is not okay, Amber said, tears now streaming down her face. My sister is refusing to help me when I need her most. Mark set Lily down and told her to go find her siblings. Once she was out of earshot, he tried to play mediator. Look, Madison, we know it's a lot to ask. But Amber really needs to reduce her stress during this pregnancy. I understand that, I said, grateful for his more measured tone. But there must be other solutions that don't involve completely disrupting 3 children's lives and my own. Like what? Amber challenged. I don't know yet. But we can figure it out together, if we approach this as a problem to solve rather than an ultimatum. There's nothing to figure out, Amber insisted. Either you help or you don't. Emma appeared in the doorway, her young face creased with worry. Mom? Aunt Madison? Why are you fighting? Amber quickly wiped her tears. We're just having a grown-up discussion, sweetie. About us staying here. Emma asked, proving she'd understood more than we realized. Yes, I answered honestly. And I was explaining to your mom that while I love having you all visit, my apartment isn't set up for 3 kids to live here full-time. Emma's face fell. So we can't stay with you. The disappointment in her voice nearly broke my resolve, but I knew making promises I couldn't keep would only hurt more in the long run. We're still figuring things out, I said gently. Your aunt doesn't think she can handle you kids, Amber said, and I shot her a warning look. Using the children as emotional leverage was crossing a line. That's not true, I told Emma firmly. It's about practical things like space and my work schedule. It has nothing to do with not wanting to be with you. Emma looked between us, clearly unconvinced. Before I could say more, Tyler and Lily came bounding in, oblivious to the tension. Can we have more cake? Tyler asked. In a minute, buddy, Mark answered, taking charge of the children. Let's let your mom and aunt finish talking. After he led them back to the dining room, I turned to Amber. Please don't put the kids in the middle of this. It's not fair to them. What's not fair is you abandoning us when we need you, Amber retorted. Wait until Mom and Dad hear about this. The threat was so childish I almost laughed. We're in our 30s, Amber. Are you really going to tattle to our parents? They'll agree with me. Family helps family. Yes, they will, because they've always enabled your poor planning just like I have, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Amber gasped. Poor planning? Is that what you think my children are? No, of course not. I love your children. But this situation, getting pregnant by someone you've known for weeks, having no backup plan except to drop 3 kids on me, yes, that's poor planning. You've always been so high and mighty, Amber hissed. So perfect and put together. Maybe if you weren't so rigid and controlling, you'd have your own family instead of having to borrow mine. The words landed like a physical blow. All my insecurities, about being unmarried at 34, about prioritizing career over relationships, about missing my chance at motherhood, crystallized in that moment. I think you should go, I said quietly. Gladly, Amber replied. Come on, kids, we're leaving. But we just got here. I heard Tyler protest from the other room. Now. Amber shouted, and I winced at her tone. What followed was a chaotic blur of crying children, Mark's awkward apologies, and Amber's continued jabs as they gathered their things. Emma was silent, her eyes downcast. Tyler was confused and whining. Lily wailed, picking up on the negative emotions saturating the air. I thought I could count on you, Amber said, her final barb as she herded her family out the door. I guess I was wrong. As the door slammed behind them, I stood in my suddenly silent apartment, surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned toys, feeling like the villain in a story I'd never asked to be part of. The silence after they left was deafening. I mechanically began clearing the table, scraping uneaten cake into the trash, loading the dishwasher, wiping sticky fingerprints from chairs. These familiar motions couldn't distract from the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. When the kitchen was spotless, far cleaner than necessary, I sank onto my couch and finally let the tears come. They weren't dainty, elegant tears, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that left me gasping for breath. Was I being selfish? Was Amber right that my organized, independent life had made me cold and unfeeling? The thought that had been lurking at the edges of my consciousness for years now took center stage. Had I failed my sister? Had all my efforts to help actually enabled her dependence? Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the argument, thinking of all the things I should have said, or shouldn't have said. By morning, my eyes were swollen, and my head pounded. I called in sick for the first time in over a year, unable to face video meetings, looking like I'd been hit by an emotional train. The first text came at 10:27 a.m. from Jessica Wilson, Amber's closest friend. Wow. Just heard what happened. Never thought you'd turn your back on those kids. I didn't respond, but my stomach clenched. Amber was already spinning her narrative. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with growing dismay. Madison, it's Mom. Amber told us what's happening. I'm very disappointed in you. Your sister needs you now more than ever. Call me back. Dad's call came 30 minutes later, his message gruffer, but essentially the same: family obligation, disappointment, expectations of me stepping up. By afternoon, I'd received messages from 2 aunts, a cousin, and several mutual friends, all expressing some version of surprise and disappointment at my refusal to help family. I scrolled through Facebook with mounting dread and found what I was looking for on Amber's page: a tearful selfie with the caption, "Finding out who really cares when times get tough. Blessed for those who stand by us, heartbroken by those who won't. #pregnancy struggles #single mom life." The comments were worse. "You and those precious babies can stay with us if needed. Can't believe anyone would abandon family like that. Some people don't understand sacrifice until they have their own children. Sending prayers for your situation and for hardened hearts to soften." Amber hadn't named me directly, but everyone in our circle knew exactly who she meant. The deliberate public shaming was a familiar tactic, one she'd used in previous conflicts with friends, exes, even our parents. I'd always been the confidant hearing about these dramas, never the target. Until now. I closed the app, feeling sick. My phone pinged again, a text from Rachel Kim, my closest friend since college, and one of the few people who truly understood my complicated relationship with Amber. "You okay? Just saw Amber's post. Want me to come over?" Her message was like a lifeline, and I found myself typing back immediately, "Please." Rachel arrived an hour later with wine, chocolate, and no judgment. She listened as I poured out the whole story, from the announcement to the argument to the social media aftermath. So basically, Rachel summarized when I'd finished: Amber announced she's pregnant by a guy she barely knows, declared her kids are moving in with you for months with zero prior discussion, and is now publicly shaming you for not immediately agreeing. Put that way, it sounded so clear-cut. "Yes, but..." "No buts," Rachel interrupted. "Madison, you've spent your whole life trying to fix problems your parents created. You practically raised Amber, and now you're helping raise her kids. There's supporting family, and then there's being taken advantage of. This crossed that line miles ago. But the kids will be fine. They have a mother and now this Mark person. Your sister is an adult who needs to solve her own problems. She's saying I don't care about family because I don't have my own." Rachel's expression hardened. "That's emotional manipulation, and it's cruel. You've sacrificed plenty for her family. Having boundaries doesn't mean you don't care." Despite Rachel's reassurance, sleep eluded me again that night. Around 3 a.m., desperate for perspective, I opened my laptop and searched "sister expecting too much help with kids." The results were a revelation: countless forum threads, advice columns, and blog posts from people in situations eerily similar to mine. People struggling with family expectations, with the blurry line between helping and enabling, with the guilt and obligation that can distort family relationships. One post in particular stopped me cold. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them figure things out on their own." I'd never thought of my constant swooping in to help Amber as potentially harmful. Had I been robbing her of the chance to develop resilience, to solve her own problems, to build confidence in her abilities? The thought was uncomfortable but compelling. By morning, I'd made a decision. I emailed my therapist, Dr. Sarah Bennett, requesting an emergency session. She had helped me work through childhood issues in the past. Now I needed her guidance on this current crisis. Dr. Bennett fit me in that afternoon. Her office was as I remembered it: calming blue walls, comfortable chairs, the subtle scent of lavender. I hadn't seen her in almost a year, but she remembered the dynamics with Amber in detail. It sounds like this situation has brought a lot of long-standing patterns to the surface, she observed after I recounted recent events. I feel horrible, I admitted. Like I'm abandoning them. But I also feel angry that Amber assumed I'd rearrange my entire life without even asking first. Both feelings can be valid simultaneously, Dr. Bennett noted. Tell me about a time in childhood when you felt similar emotions. The memory surfaced immediately. I was 12. Had my first invitation to a friend's birthday sleepover. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. The day of the party, Mom announced she and Dad were going out, and I needed to stay home with Amber. How did you feel? Devastated. Angry. But also guilty for wanting to go to the party instead of taking care of my sister. And what happened? I stayed home. Amber and I made cookies and watched movies. She fell asleep on the couch with her head in my lap. I remember looking down at her and feeling this mix of love and resentment. Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. That pattern has continued into adulthood. You sacrifice your needs for Amber's, feel conflicted about it, but ultimately prioritize her well-being over your own desires. Because that's what you do for family, I said automatically. Is it? Or is that what you were conditioned to believe was your responsibility from a very young age? The question hung in the air, challenging decades of deeply ingrained beliefs. Madison, healthy family relationships involve mutual support, respect for boundaries, and recognition of each person's individual needs. What I'm hearing is that Amber expects accommodation without reciprocation. Over the next hour, Dr. Bennett helped me see the unhealthy dynamics that had defined my relationship with Amber since childhood. How I'd been cast in the role of rescuer. How Amber had learned that emotional escalation would eventually break down my resistance. How our parents had reinforced these patterns by abdicating their responsibilities to me. So what do I do now? I asked finally. The damage is done. Everyone thinks I'm a heartless aunt who won't help her pregnant sister. What others think isn't within your control, Dr. Bennett reminded me. What is within your control is how you respond to this situation moving forward. I want to help Amber and the kids, I said. Just not in the way she's demanding. That's a good starting point. What kind of help can you realistically offer that honors your boundaries? I left the session with homework to create a list of ways I could support Amber and the children without sacrificing my own well-being. It wouldn't repair the damage immediately, but it was a step toward a healthier relationship, if Amber was willing to meet me halfway. That evening, I sat down with a notepad and began to write. The blank page stared back at me for a long time, before I finally wrote the heading, Ways I Can Help. The list started small: weekend childcare, financial assistance for a part-time nanny, researching family support programs, but gradually expanded as I allowed myself to think creatively within the boundaries of what felt sustainable. I could adjust my work schedule to help with school drop-offs 3 days a week. I could convert my office into a temporary bedroom for Emma on weekends, giving her a break from the chaos at home and special one-on-one time with me. I could set aside money each month specifically for childcare to help Amber through the late stages of pregnancy and early newborn period. What I wouldn't do, was upend my entire life, sacrifice my career, and take on full-time parenting of 3 children overnight. The clarity felt both liberating and terrifying. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my company's HR representative. Brian Mitchell had always been supportive, and I hoped he could help me understand what flexibility my job might allow. First, let me say that your work has been exceptional, Brian said after I explained the situation. The company values you and wants to help you balance personal challenges with professional responsibilities. He outlined several options, adjusting my hours to start earlier and end earlier 3 days a week, using some accumulated personal days strategically rather than all at once, possibly reducing to 80% time temporarily with proportional pay reduction, if absolutely necessary. The key is communication, Brian emphasized. Keep your team updated, meet your deadlines, be present for critical meetings. Most other things can be worked around. His understanding was a relief. At least my professional life wasn't in jeopardy if I helped Amber in more limited ways. That evening, Rachel came over again, this time with takeout Thai food and practical suggestions. You need to document everything, she advised. The original conversation, the social media posts, the flying monkey texts from family members. If this escalates further, you'll want a record. You think Amber would go that far? I asked, though I knew the answer. When emotionally wounded, my sister could be vindictive. I think she's already tried to destroy your reputation and relationships, Rachel pointed out. Better safe than sorry. We spent the next hour cataloging messages and screenshots, organizing them chronologically. The pattern was clear. Amber's public accusations had prompted a wave of concerned messages, which had gradually tapered off as the initial drama faded. People have short attention spans for others' problems, Rachel noted. In a week, they'll be focused on some new drama. She was right, but the damage to my family relationships felt more lasting. My parents remained firmly on Amber's side, leaving voicemails that alternated between guilt trips and angry accusations. The deeper hurt was their automatic assumption that I was wrong without even hearing my perspective, a pattern that stretched back to childhood. I need to process all this, I told Rachel as she was leaving. Figure out what kind of relationship I want with Amber moving forward, and with my parents. Just remember you're not the villain here, she said, hugging me tightly. Setting boundaries is healthy, not selfish. After she left, I turned to the meditation practice I'd neglected in recent weeks. Settling on my yoga mat, I focused on my breath, acknowledging each emotion as it surfaced: anger at Amber's manipulation, hurt at my parents' quick judgment, worry for the children caught in the middle, and deeper grief for the supportive family I'd never really had. The next morning brought unexpected clarity. I realized I'd been living in reaction mode with Amber for years, responding to crises, putting out fires, cleaning up messes. I'd never stepped back to consider what a healthy relationship might actually look like. I opened my laptop and began researching in earnest. Articles on codependency, enabling behaviors, and setting healthy boundaries. Resources for single mothers, including government assistance programs, non-profit support services, and community childcare options. Information about high-risk pregnancies and practical support needed. Armed with knowledge, I created a comprehensive document, part personal boundary statement, part resource guide for Amber. It outlined exactly what help I could realistically offer, alternative sources of support she could explore, and clear expectations for our relationship moving forward. The final section was the hardest to write: what I need from you. In it, I detailed the respect, communication, and reciprocity necessary for our relationship to heal. No more public shaming. No more last-minute emergencies that could have been prevented with planning. No more using the children as emotional leverage. As I worked on the document, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about Amber's current pregnancy crisis. This was about decades of unhealthy patterns, of roles we'd both been playing since childhood. Breaking these patterns would be painful, but necessary, not just for my well-being, but ultimately for Amber's growth and for the children's future. I also recognized my own role in enabling Amber's dependence. Each time I'd swooped in to save the day, I'd reinforced her belief that she didn't need to plan ahead or develop problem-solving skills. My help, offered from love, but without boundaries, had become a crutch that weakened rather than strengthened her. The realization was humbling. I'd prided myself on being the responsible one, the good sister, the reliable aunt. But in my own way, I'd been as dysfunctional as Amber. Needing to be needed, deriving identity from being the family rescuer, avoiding my own life challenges by focusing on hers. A week passed with no contact from Amber. The social media campaign against me had faded as Rachel predicted, though occasional passive-aggressive posts still appeared. I used the time to implement small, but meaningful changes in my life. I joined a book club I'd been putting off for months, citing busy weekends with the kids as my excuse. I accepted a dinner invitation from a colleague who'd been trying to set me up with her brother. I reclaimed my spare room as a proper guest room rather than the half-office, half-playroom it had become. Each small step was an affirmation. My life had value on its own terms, not just as Amber's support system. When I finally felt centered enough to reach out, I texted Amber, "I miss the kids. Would love to see them this weekend if possible. Also have some ideas I'd like to discuss about how I can help during your pregnancy in ways that work for everyone. Coffee at Riverside Cafe Saturday morning." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "The kids miss you too. Saturday, 10 a.m. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Riverside Cafe was busier than I expected for a Saturday morning. I arrived 15 minutes early to secure a quiet corner table, ordering an herbal tea to calm my nerves while I waited. I'd brought printed copies of the resource guide I'd created, plus notes for what I wanted to say. Amber arrived exactly on time, which was unusual for her. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her normally bouncy curls pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She was showing more than I expected at this stage, her 4th pregnancy evident in the tight stretch of her t-shirt over her belly. "Thanks for coming," I said as she sat down, unsure how to navigate this new tension between us. "The kids wouldn't stop asking about you," she replied, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "Emma especially. Not 'I missed you too,' or 'I wanted to talk.' Just the implication that she was here for the children's sake, not her own." I took a deep breath, determined not to be baited into defensiveness myself. "How are you feeling?" I asked, genuinely concerned about her pregnancy. Something in my tone must have registered as sincere, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Tired. Morning sickness has been worse with this one than with the others. I'm sorry to hear that. Have you been able to get any rest?" She shrugged. "Not much with 3 kids and work. Mark helps when he can, but his delivery schedule is all over the place." I nodded, seeing an opening. "That's actually part of what I wanted to talk about. I've been thinking a lot about how I can help you and the kids during this time, in ways that are sustainable for everyone." Wariness returned to her expression. "Meaning you still won't take the kids?" "Not full-time, no," I said gently but firmly. "But I have other ideas that could really help." I slid the folder across the table. "I've put together some information, programs you might qualify for, scheduling options that would let me help with the kids regularly, financial assistance I can offer for childcare. I also reached out to my HR department about flexibility in my work schedule." Amber flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. "You made a spreadsheet." "Of course you did." The old Amber jab at my organized nature, but without the usual affectionate tone. I let it pass. "I want to be clear about something," I said. "I love you and I love those kids. I want to support you through this pregnancy and beyond. But I need to do it in ways that don't compromise my own health and stability. Because your life is so important," she muttered. "Yes," I said firmly. "My life is important. Just like yours is. And the healthier and more stable I am, the better support I can be for you and the children long term." She looked up, surprised by my directness. Amber, what happens if I burn out? If I lose my job, trying to be a full-time caregiver while working full-time? If my mental health deteriorates under the strain? How does that help you or the kids in the long run? She didn't answer immediately, toying with the corner of a page in the folder. I've thought a lot about our relationship, I continued. How I've always tried to rescue you, and how maybe that hasn't always been good for either of us. So now it's my fault that I needed help. Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. No, that's not what I'm saying, I kept my voice steady. I'm saying that always jumping in to fix everything hasn't helped you develop your own strength and problem-solving abilities. And it's created an expectation that I'll drop everything whenever there's a crisis. You make it sound like I create crises on purpose. I don't think it's on purpose. But there's a pattern of urgent situations that could have been prevented with planning. I took a sip of tea, choosing my next words carefully. Like getting pregnant by someone you've known for 2 months, without discussing parenting plans or living arrangements first. Her cheeks flushed. You think I planned this pregnancy? No, but once it happened, your only plan was to hand off your existing children to me. That's not fair to me or to them. Tears filled her eyes, but I forced myself to continue. Years of avoiding difficult conversations had led us here. Only honesty would move us forward. In this folder are real, practical ways I can help. Weekend care for the kids so you can rest. Financial assistance for a part-time nanny. Information on programs for single mothers. My adjusted work schedule so I can help with school drop-offs 3 days a week. But full-time care for months isn't something I can offer. And if I say it's not enough, she challenged. Then we'll have to accept that we have different expectations of this relationship, I said, the words painful but necessary. But I hope you'll look through everything first. These aren't token gestures, Amber. This is meaningful support that I can sustain. She wiped her eyes, then pulled the folder closer and began reading more carefully. I waited, heart pounding, as she flipped through the pages. You found all these programs? She asked finally, gesturing to the list of assistance options. Yes. Many of them you likely qualify for, especially with a 4th child on the way. Some have waiting lists, which is why applying now makes sense. She nodded slowly. And this childcare fund? I'd contribute $500 monthly specifically for childcare. Non-negotiable, not dependent on anything else. Just reliable support you can count on. For the first time, I saw consideration rather than dismissal in her expression. And weekends? You'd still take the kids? Every other weekend, yes. And I've talked to my boss about working remotely from your place 1 day a week, when you're on bed rest, so I can help with the kids after school. What about Emma? She's been asking when she can stay at your place again. I smiled, thinking of my bookish niece. I've actually converted my office into a space for her. She can come for special aunt-niece weekends, just the 2 of us. You'd separate her from her siblings. Only occasionally, and only if she wants to. I thought it might give her some quiet space away from the chaos, and some one-on-one attention. Amber was quiet for a long moment. She'd like that, she admitted finally. She's been struggling with all the changes. The conversation shifted then, becoming less confrontational and more collaborative. We discussed practical logistics, school schedules, Mark's work hours, doctor appointments. Amber shared more about the pregnancy complications she'd mentioned, which were real but not as severe as she'd initially implied. I was scared, she confessed eventually. When I found out I was pregnant again, I panicked. Mark's great, but it's all so new, and the kids are already so much work, and I just I couldn't see how to make it all work. I understand being scared, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm scared too, of letting you down, of failing the kids, of losing my own stability. But we'll figure this out together, just not in the way you originally suggested. 2 hours later, we had a workable plan, one that offered Amber significant support, without requiring me to sacrifice my own well-being. It wasn't perfect, and both of us had to compromise, but it felt sustainable and respectful of everyone's needs. As we prepared to leave, Amber said hesitantly, "I'm sorry about the Facebook posts. And getting everyone to text you. That wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "But I appreciate the apology." "I'll tell Mom and Dad the truth," she offered. "That we've worked things out." It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. "I'd appreciate that." We hugged goodbye, the embrace slightly awkward but genuine. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful that our relationship could evolve into something healthier, not just for us, but for the children who were watching and learning from our example. 2 months passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. My apartment now featured a twin bed in the converted office, Emma's special space, decorated with the astronomy posters she loved and bookshelves filled with titles I'd carefully selected for her advanced reading level. The main guest room had a trundle bed for Tyler's weekend visits, and a toddler rail attached to the queen bed for Lily. These adjustments, while significant, felt different from what Amber had originally demanded. They were changes I'd chosen, spaces I'd created with love rather than resentment. The distinction made all the difference. My adjusted work schedule, starting earlier 3 days a week to handle school drop-offs, had actually improved my productivity. My boss had noticed, commenting on my more focused approach to meetings and deadlines. The boundaries I'd been forced to establish around my time had clarified my priorities in unexpected ways. Most surprisingly, Mark had stepped up significantly. Once it became clear that I wouldn't be the default solution to their childcare challenges, he'd rearranged his delivery routes to be home by 3 p.m. 3 days a week. He'd proven more capable with the children than either Amber or I had initially given him credit for. Tyler actually listens to him, Amber had noted with a mix of admiration and irritation during one of our coffee catch-ups. I've been trying to get that child to pick up his toys for 5 years, and Mark just has to ask once. The changes in Amber herself were more subtle, but meaningful. She'd applied for several of the assistance programs I'd researched, securing additional food benefits and childcare subsidies that eased the financial strain. She'd started a simple budgeting system, tracking expenses in a way she'd always dismissed as too controlling when I'd suggested it in the past. Our relationship remained a work in progress. There were tense moments, like when she called at midnight expecting me to come over because Lily had a fever, or when she forgot we'd agreed I wouldn't take the kids on a weekend, I had an important work deadline. But these incidents decreased as our new boundaries held firm. My relationships with the children deepened in unexpected ways. Emma blossomed during our one-on-one weekends, sharing thoughts and dreams she kept hidden in the chaotic household. Tyler's weekend visits became adventures in Lego engineering as we built increasingly complex structures together. Even little Lily, initially clingy and tearful during overnight stays, now had a good-night routine she loved, 3 books, 2 songs, and 1 special dream I'd whisper in her ear before lights out. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Through continued sessions with Dr. Bennett, I'd begun to recognize and address the caretaker identity I'd constructed since childhood. I was learning that saying no didn't make me selfish or uncaring. It made me honest about my capabilities and limitations. I'd also started dating again, something I'd subconsciously put on hold as Amber's needs expanded to fill any free time I might have had. Nothing serious yet, but enjoyable evenings with interesting men who knew nothing about my complicated family dynamics, conversations that didn't revolve around crises or childcare logistics. Today marked a significant milestone, the birth of Amber's fourth child, a healthy baby boy they'd named James. I stood in the hospital room, watching Mark cradle his newborn son, with a look of awe while the other children peered curiously at their new brother. "He's so tiny," Emma observed, her voice hushed. "You were even smaller," I told her, remembering the day I'd first held her, how terrified and determined Amber had been at 19. "Was I that small too?" Tyler asked, and I nodded, causing him to beam with pride at having grown so much. Lily seemed unimpressed, more interested in the buttons on the hospital bed than her new sibling. At 3, her world was still primarily self-centered, a developmental stage Amber now recognized rather than fought against. "Want to hold him, Maddie?" Amber asked from the bed, using my childhood nickname without the edge it had carried in recent years. I took the tiny bundle carefully, marveling at the perfect features, the wispy dark hair, the complete trust with which he settled into my arms. "He's beautiful, Amber." "You did good." "We did good," she corrected, reaching for Mark's hand. "All of us." The simple acknowledgement that raising children takes a village, not just a martyr, felt like healing. Later, as Mark took the older children to the cafeteria for ice cream, Amber and I had a moment alone. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything these past months. For the childcare fund, for taking the kids on weekends so I could rest, for helping me find the assistance programs." "That's what family does," I replied, echoing our old refrain, but with new understanding of what it actually meant. "No, family sometimes does a lot less," Amber said with surprising insight. "Or demands a lot more. We got lucky with you." She paused, then added, "I'm sorry I tried to take advantage of that." The acknowledgement meant more than she could know. "I'm sorry too," I said. "For times I've enabled rather than truly helped. For not being honest sooner about my boundaries." "We're both learning," she said, reaching for my hand. "The kids are watching us figure it out." And that was perhaps the most important realization of this journey, that Emma, Tyler, Lily, and now James were absorbing our example. They were learning about healthy relationships, about communication, about balancing needs and responsibilities. The patterns we established now would shape their understanding of family obligation and personal boundaries for decades to come. I'd once thought setting boundaries was selfish. Now I understood it was the most loving gift I could offer, not just to myself, but to Amber and the children. By refusing to be the solution to every problem, I'd created space for others to grow, for new solutions to emerge, for healthier patterns to develop. As I held baby James, watching his tiny face scrunch in sleep, I felt not the weight of obligation, but the genuine joy of being his aunt, a role I could embrace fully, because I'd defined its limits. I would be part of his village, one of many supports in his life, but not at the cost of my own well-being. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, the growth uncomfortable. But standing here now, I knew with certainty that I'd made the right choice, not just for me, but for all of us. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who expected too much? How did you balance your own needs with family obligations? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for watching, and remember that true family support means helping others grow, not enabling dependency.